and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, I know you're a bit of an imposter.
To many, it's absolutely the case. But, you know, we have got some fantastic help today in the personage of Clare. Now, listen to this, Josa. And that's like Josa. So basically, you don't say the J, you say the Yosa. So I'm out of breath saying it now. So Claire, welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you, Graham and Kevin. It's lovely to be here.
Now, I can see a book on your bookshelf behind you that says Ditching Imposter Syndrome. So I guess that must be what we're talking about.
I hope so. Then we're in the right place at the right time.
Well, tell us one thing. Kevin probably knows the answer to this, but I don't. I don't know what imposter syndrome means.
And it's a very useful question to start off with today. So I define imposter syndrome as that gap between who we see ourselves as being and who we think we need to be to achieve something. And we spend an awful lot of energy, if there is a gap there, worrying that other people might find us out, that they might realize we're a fraud, that we're not good enough. So we build what I call the bridge of coping strategies, go over that gap to be able to succeed despite imposter syndrome. But that then comes at huge personal cost. You know, trying to stop ourselves self-sabotaging, trying to stop ourselves putting our prices down, not volunteering for opportunities we secretly want, lying awake at 3 a.m, worried that tomorrow is the day that somebody will realize that we're just faking it.
Right. That sounds, I mean, a lot of that sounds like it's part of my history, at least parts of it anyway. I've got to say, I don't perhaps suffer as much as I did. In corporate, for instance, when you've got people around you who are always very, very clever and, you know, they seem to have the inside track. And I think what I just said there, they seem to have the inside track. Maybe they're just better at it, at covering up their gap, or their gap is narrower, or they're just insane.
I think, well, let's go with them better at covering it up. But I remember when I first started out working in this field about 20 years ago, a colleague of mine was talking about being in a board meeting. And back in those days, you looked around the board meeting and there was nothing but middle-aged men. And he was talking about how he experienced imposter syndrome. And he actually had the courage to talk about this in a board meeting and describe the behaviors and describe the talk that was going on in his head.
Yeah.
He said everybody in the room kind of staring at their feet. And then one brave soul went, me too. And then nearly everybody in the room put their hand up. So everybody thought everybody had their act together. But even at that most senior level, where we assume people are completely confident and hugely successful, the research study we've just published in April shows that 62% of people in a corporate environment are struggling with this daily or regularly in any given year.
You know, there is a different way of looking at that board meeting. When they all had their hands up, they were saying, fire him. Yeah, I agree. Fire him. It's such a weak-willed person. But actually, it's not, is it? It took tremendous strength to actually admit to that, didn't it?
Yeah. Now, I can back up exactly what you said there, Claire, because we've done, in my other business, Grow CFO, we've done a lot of research around newly appointed CFOs, folks that are moving into that role for the first time. And we've asked people what their 5 or 6 biggest challenges are. Number 1 and number 2, and I think they're broadly the same things: imposter syndrome and lack of confidence.
Absolutely. So you can lack confidence without imposter syndrome, but if you're running imposter syndrome, you will be lacking confidence. And Kevin, what you're saying there was really insightful, because we found in the research there are certain trigger points for imposter syndrome. Anything that shifts our sense of identity, our sense of who we are. So, for example, being promoted into a C-suite role, suddenly that imposter syndrome gap widens. It's like, oh my goodness, I've got to be that now. Yeah. And so the bridge of coping strategies is no longer big enough. And we either have to desperately build a better bridge of coping strategies, or we avoid the opportunity completely. So being promoted is a major trigger point for imposter syndrome that was previously dormant or that a person was coping with, and it really needs to be dealt with.
Isn't this happened for years, though? Decades?
It's happened for decades, but it's got a lot worse in the last 20 years. And part of that is social media. Because one of the other ways I define imposter syndrome is it's the secret fear of others judging us the way we're judging ourselves.
Right.
And what I found in the latest research study, something that we call comparisonitis. So you compare yourself to others and decide that they're better than you, they're more confident, they've got their act together, they're more successful.
Yeah.
People are struggling with this now at a rate of 82% in any given week and 15% multiple times a day. So multiple times a day, they're comparing themselves on social media or on the company website or newsletter or notice board with other people and going, I'm not good enough. What if they find me out? So the opportunity to compare ourselves is vastly increased compared to 20 years ago. And this is one of the major daily triggers for imposter syndrome.
Right. So it's social media's fault again.
It's the fact that we're judging ourselves. And also, yeah, there is a huge role in social media, because social media, we all know it's the algorithm telling us what we should be interested in.
Yeah.
And so it's other people's highlight reels, but it's then what the algorithm says are the best bits of the best highlight reels. Yeah. So what we're comparing ourselves with is not realistic on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Actually, we don't have that problem here because we don't have highlight reels. We have low light reels. So basically, we set the bar so low that we'll never have this problem. But I maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I mean, is there a mental bar setting exercise that you go through?
There definitely can be.
Yeah.
But what's normally happening is imposter syndrome tends to affect most strongly the people who feel quite drawn to be high achievers.
Right.
Those who particularly want to make a difference, they want to excel. We found in the research that perfectionism plays a large part in it. It can trigger imposter syndrome, and imposter syndrome can increase it. So some of it is down to how we're wired, how we talk to ourselves as we were brought up. So some of the work I actually do is with schools to try and help them to teach children to learn how not to develop these particular thought habits. But a lot of it is the fact that we are compared and judged. Life is so much faster. And if it matters to you how you're seen in the outside world and you're comparing yourself to others and you're judging yourself, then you are going to end up struggling with things like imposter syndrome.
Oh, it sounds that it's so difficult to get out of the. It's almost like a car that's heading to you at night, and you can't jump out of the way of it. It's coming to run you over. There's no way out, or is there a way out?
Well, there's got to be a way out. There's got to be a
there are. Otherwise, exactly. Otherwise, my book would be a lie. Okay.
Well, it's not the first book that we've had on here, and we've read them. No. I mean, I'm sure it isn't a lie, but go on. Tell us more about how it helps.
So, what doesn't work is that bridge of coping strategies. Is I'm going to toughen up, or I'm going to push on through, or I'm going to pretend it's okay, or I'm going to put on a persona or an alter ego.
Yeah.
All of that can work short term, but it comes at huge personal cost. So when I work with people on imposter syndrome, we do that kind of like, right, you need to press pause. Because as you say, if you're on that train or if that car's coming at you, you need to be able to stop it first before you can turn it around.
Yeah.
And then we look at, right, what do I need to do to clear out the habits, both my thought habits, so you can rewire the neural pathways. So you literally rewire your inner critic to become a genuine cheerleader. But you also need to rewire the body, because the body gets addicted to the stress hormones that imposter syndrome causes. It gets addicted to the adrenaline, the cortisol. So even if you're sitting there zenned out, doing your little meditations and everything, the body says, hey, I haven't had enough cortisol today, Claire. It will fire off thoughts that create the stress. Right. So you need to deal with both. And when you've got to the stage that you can press pause, you're rewiring the neural pathways in the body to genuinely shift that inner radio station. So the stories we're telling ourselves change. Then we can start creating the habit changes. We can reclaim our personal power. We can reset toxic boundaries. We can start taking off the masks and the armor by dealing with what was causing the need for them. So instead of pretending, what we're doing is clearing out what was triggering this. So my background was engineering. I specialized in Six Sigma for years. So I'm all into the root causes. Let's look at what was firing off all of this surface level stuff. Resolve that in a healthy way. And then you don't need the rest of it. So instead of building like the fourth bridge over your imposter syndrome gap, you clear the stuff that was causing you to think that you weren't that version of yourself. So you become that version, yeah?
You've already told us you've got 3 degrees, which is like,
Not quite, but 2.
No, you were bragging about it earlier, and all I can say is I'm only kidding. You've already demonstrated that you're so very bright, but the point is, just make this a bit simpler for me.
Okay.
What is it? What's the natural thing that somebody's going to be? Those little things that you were addressing, the Six Sigma thing, you get into the root causes. What's the root cause of that leads to imposter syndrome, for instance?
Okay. So if I look at it in the corporate world, for example, because we've already mentioned CFOs, that kind of environment, it can be something like lots of mini traumas. So say somebody's worked for a toxic boss, or they've been in a team with a toxic colleague, and they've experienced bullying or microaggressions, being put down, constantly living on edge. You become what's called hypervigilant. So the bit in your body that's looking, that fight, flight, freeze response gets stuck on. So the brain and the body are then wired on. And so the tiniest triggers will trigger off the fear-based response that triggers imposter syndrome. So you've been through that micro traumas building up over time. And I've worked with clients who, like Kevin says, you get promoted up to that director, head of, C-suite level. Suddenly it's coming up to bite them. They can't pretend anymore. And it's often something from 10 years before where they had a toxic manager and they didn't get to resolve the pain that caused and the self-preservation habits that we create to be able to cope with it. So that is a classic example of what would trigger imposter syndrome.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. And I think in that example as well, you're talking about a role switch that's taking you very much outside of your comfort zone. I look at kind of you've got a head of finance who's very much preparing the accounts, looking after the finance team, doing the drumbeat of stuff. It's kind of the internal face of finance. Been doing for years, talking to all the Microsoft spreadsheets, which probably didn't work. Now look with Microsoft, Graham, but never mind. But CFO becomes the outward face of finance, talking to investors. He's got to become the co-pilot of the business with the CEO. And overnight, the role has changed from those things that they qualified to do in terms of an accountancy qualification that they've developed over years and years and years into something that's quite different. I think it's that sudden shift that's part of the problem.
It is, Kevin. And one of the things that's happening there is it's actually the shift really from managing to leading. When we make that, it's a very big identity shift. That you're no longer in there doing the doing. You need to be able to do strategic thinking. You need to be visible. You need to be the one that's actually setting the direction rather than necessarily collaborating with everybody to co-decide it. So that's quite a big identity shift. It's also a really big skill set shift that most people don't get trained in how to do. And a lot of the time when they get promoted to that level, unless they've moved company, moved organization, they often take a lot of their old to-do list with them. So they don't have the time to be able to do that strategic thinking and the leadership that the new C-suite level role requires.
So it's a natural bedfellow of promotion then is imposter syndrome. So
it is promotion and anything that creates a major life change. So becoming a parent, graduating from university, all things where it shifts who we see ourselves as being. Bereavement is another big one.
It's bereavement's putting that to one side, but I'm thinking most of those other examples are all about change, aren't they? So, I mean, you see it on TV sometimes, and you see people say, "I love change," and you think, "What's wrong with you?" But at the end of the day, change happens, and you accommodate it. And I think maybe the quicker that you accept sort of change and the things that are going on around you, maybe that bridge is like a little hop as opposed to a bridge. And I think it seems to me that somewhere in that is the answer to this problem, that somehow it's the accommodation of things that are going on around you that's changing your situation. Because frankly, if you got promoted, somebody thought you were going to be able to do the things that you were going to end up doing. So what's the problem?
So Graham, this is one of the beautiful things about imposter syndrome. I'm really glad you said that. It's not rational. Yeah, you cannot pep talk yourself out of imposter syndrome. So you can sit there and say logically, and some of the common advice on the internet is write down a list of things you've done well.
Yeah, yeah.
Somebody who's running lack of confidence, they'll do that and they'll go, oh, actually, yeah, fair enough. I'm all right. Somebody running imposter syndrome, for every single one, there'll be a but.
Yeah.
But, okay, they've just promoted me into this new role. Yeah, but I just hoodwinked them. Yeah, what if they don't know what they're doing? What if they made a mistake choosing me? What if today is the day that my luck runs out? And this is why you need to do the below the surface work to clear that deep fear. Yeah, because it's about when the change happens, suddenly somebody feeling on an identity level, I'm not safe. And so they will do unconsciously whatever they can to keep themselves safe, which normally means self-sabotage. It can often mean in a promotion situation, somebody turns into a toxic boss because they're projecting their pain onto the team and they don't want the team to let them down.
Yeah.
And if we clear it, and it literally takes just a few weeks, and you can clear this out really forever. Yeah. If we take the time and give people the support to do that, then they can thrive in that role rather than half their head the whole day being stuck on how do I stay safe?
You're a kind of a sort of a mental dynarod sort of consultant then, in a way. So you go in and you sort of hose down people's previous fears that they've built to sort of accommodate things. But it's not so much hosing them away. I guess it's understanding them, talking. Is it a talking therapy?
So it's a great question. So when I also train master coaches to do the work that I do,
yeah,
and when they work with people, I've developed techniques that you don't need to use the words for. Because one of the things that happens if we keep repeating the story of something that happened to us where we feel disempowered or a victim or pain, it hurt,
right.
The more we tell the story with strong emotion, the more it reinforces those neural pathways, the thoughts in the brain.
Yeah.
So to truly clear it, a lot of the time using processes that actually work on the body's memory rather than the thinking memory means you can actually clear it out without having to get into the whole drama and the pain, which is absolutely incredible. So you can support somebody who's been through that kind of situation without them having to relive it during the client session.
Tell us how that happens then, because that sounds amazing. So you get the body to, it's a bit like, well, I know I can play for Leeds United in my head, but my body, well, it's not going to work. I play for Newcastle because, well, lesser team and all that. But the truth is my body won't do it. So what is it that you do with the body?
Okay.
Give us an example.
So in the simplest form, because obviously I can't kind of teach the process to everybody that's watching today, but in the simplest form, what you're doing is you're getting people to connect with the emotion that they feel just before they self-sabotage. Okay, because that's their body's warning sign. The body always knows before the thinking mind. There's a slight lag in the processing. You connect with where in the body that is and what the physical sensation is. Then you use the process that I teach, which is based on meridian tapping. Okay, so this is where you tap different pressure points on the body. It's all right. Shaking your head is fine if you've never done it before. But what you can then do is you can use that process to release the physical sensation of the emotion in the body. And when you do that, it creates shifts in the body and it creates shifts in the thoughts and it creates shifts in the behaviors. And you can clear stuff out that maybe somebody's been holding on to for decades in a way that just feels safe. It's like there's a block in the body and you clear that and then it clears the rest of the impacts. Our thoughts and our body and our emotions are all connected.
So is one session of tapping somebody around the body? Yeah, I mean, I can exercise this on next time I'm with Kevin. I'll give him a slap around the head every now and again, and just.
I don't think that's quite
worried about
you, Graham.
You'd be worried about this, Kevin. Slap, clearly that's not the right approach.
So I would never go in with something that deep on a first session. And when I work with people, or when my master coaches work with people, to get the fastest result, it's actually a blend of self-study training and the mentoring exercises. So what you're doing with the self-study stuff is you're loosening everything up. You're clearing out the low-hanging fruit, the easy wins. Right. So when you come to your mentoring session, you're absolutely ready to do the deeper change. And what we found is with something like my Stepping Up to Lead program, you can create 2 years worth of coaching change in 3 months.
Wow.
And it's much less painful, much more fun, and it works and it lasts.
That's a good point. How long before you need to, before you you go backwards again?
You don't, because that old 6 root cause. So back in my engineering days, if I stopped the production line for a quality issue, it cost $2,000 a minute, and that was 20 years ago. Yeah. So you would do your sticky plaster to get the line running, but you couldn't risk that happening again day after day. So you would then buy the time to do the root cause stuff. And when you fixed what was truly causing it, that problem cannot happen again.
The thing about you is you've written 8 books. You've been quoted by the likes of The Independent, The Daily Telegraph, Radio 4. Well, we can forget that. Radio 4. I mean, that's,
the World Service was fun, though.
Oh, the World. They've still got some credibility, but basically,
so you did the shipping forecast.
Yeah.
You know what? I do find that very mesmerizing.
Maybe you could blend it into your technique. But seriously, you've been. I mean, you're an international keynote speaker. The fact that imposter syndrome exists, if you had to take a shot at it, how many people I don't know, if there's 1,000 people in corporate, how many of them will have imposter syndrome?
So at a level that's impacting their day-to-day performance and risking them ending up burnt out, the research study we've just finished showed it's gone up over the lockdowns, and it's now 62% daily or regularly in any given year. When we looked at who doesn't have it at all in a year, that figure was, drum roll, 11%.
That's a tiny number that don't have it. But question here then, Claire. Burnout.
Yep.
Is burnout and imposter syndrome a direct correlation? Or are there loads of other causes of burnout that we should be thinking about?
So there are obviously many things that can cause burnout, but what we found, and we've spent 2 years researching the connection up to our April study, there is a causal link in both directions between burnout and imposter syndrome. So if you're running imposter syndrome, it puts you at higher risk of burnout. If you're heading towards burnout, it makes imposter syndrome worse. But the brilliant news is it means if you deal with the burnout, it brings the imposter syndrome down and vice versa. So the tools I teach, we actually now use for both because they're so effective. One of the big things for burnout is something I call toxic resilience. That gritted teeth determination, the bounce back, the push on through, the pretend that you're okay.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about hypervigilance. It triggers all of that in the brain and the body. When you learn how to press pause on the stress response, which most people don't even know how to switch that off, but it doesn't take more than 60 seconds when you know how.
Yeah.
And you start clearing out the thought processes, what I call the mind story fears, the stories we're telling ourselves, what if and catastrophizing, and you clear out the body's exhaustion from adrenaline, then all of that brings the burnout down. And it also brings the imposter syndrome down because a lot of what triggers it is the stories that we're telling ourselves. So being able to rewire those, to rewrite them and choose which thoughts to feed helps to start setting you free that's like the sticky plaster to get the production line back running, while you then do the deeper work to clear out what was causing it so you don't need that surface level behavior, the coping strategies anymore.
One of the questions in my mind is how many, if you think about demographics, my instinct on this is that Kevin and I are both in our 60s now, and I know we don't look it, but the point is, this is where you should have said, "Oh yeah, you know."
I didn't want to interrupt you. No, 25.
You have interrupted me, so thanks very much. No, seriously though, are there a certain decades when this is, magnitudes higher? I mean, I'm thinking maybe 40s. Is probably peak imposter syndrome. I don't know. I mean, what does the research? And is it a female or a male thing? Which one is it?
Great questions. Yeah. I'll take the gender one first. Males versus females. We were really shocked in the 2019 research study, the first large one I ran. We found that it was half. It was exactly the same.
Right.
It was 52% of female respondents, 49% of male respondents. The thing is, they handle it very differently. The women were 20 times more likely than the men to go and ask for help or talk about it. the men were 5 times more likely than women to turn to drugs, alcohol, medication as a coping strategy for the anxiety.
Wow.
So the men were really...
Yeah, that figures.
Yeah?
Yeah,
So
that really figures.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of men who struggle with this, but they've put on such a brave face. But what also happens with the women is they will hold back. So if we're looking at your CFOs, for example, Kevin, you'll find that for a woman to apply for that role takes a lot more courage than it does for the men.
Yes.
Because they're handling it differently. The men will see, well, I tick most of the boxes. The women are waiting until they're completely ready. And if they get the nudge saying, go on, Claire, you can do this, then that can trigger enormous fight, flight, freeze for them. And they're at higher risk of sabotaging the interview or quitting. Yeah. Wow. It's jumping ship, leaving a job they love because of imposter syndrome. When I look at the ages, we thought there'd be an age thing, and it actually comes down to life stages. So there's a huge peak for students at university who go from potentially being pretty bright in their school to they suddenly get to uni and they're normal. Then when they graduate, there's another one as they go into their first job or if they stay on to do research. Then there tends to be another one around that parenting stage, because that's a real, it changes your identity a lot. Then we're looking really at the sort of the next level up promotions, heading into a managerial role, heading into a leadership role. For women, there's another trigger point around the menopause, because that's another big identity shift, and the challenges there can make it literally and physically harder to think straight. So you're really looking at what are those life stages, and they tend to be the main trigger points and the main peak points. And these days, we all do those life stages at different times.
Yeah, I guess that's true. The thought process in my head was that come late 50s, 60s, well, you don't give a damn. So from that point of view, you're probably not quite as susceptible to imposter syndrome, or is that just me making it up?
It will depend on how important it is to that person to still be growing and thriving. Yeah. If somebody's reached the stage where they think, you know what, actually, I'm pretty happy where I am, and not striving for that next level of promotion, then what you're describing is what I'd expect to be seeing. If though they're sitting there thinking, do you know what, I retire in 10 years and I just want to make it there and I haven't yet. And they are still likely to be judging themselves. And if you're judging yourself, you're probably running imposter syndrome.
And of course, at that age, you're probably judging yourself against somebody who's 20 years younger than you. Potentially.
And that's a really big trigger point as well, is where you start seeing people younger than you being promoted past you.
Yeah. Yeah, that must be awful. It didn't really happen to me that often, but about you, Kevin?
Well, I went in management consultancy relatively late.
Yeah.
So I was finding myself at the same level as quite a lot of people who were maybe 5-10 years younger. That never bothered me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Tell you what, I think the interesting one is in the 50 to 60 age group is that it's that step out of corporate and potentially having to go it alone as a consultant, set up your own business. I think that's one I've heard of a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome in that scenario. And again, big change.
Big change. We also found, Kevin, that with the stats for people running their own business, before I've mentioned the 62% in the general population, the people running their own daily or regularly in any given year.
Not surprised.
Much higher. And comparisonitis is through the roof, because suddenly we're marketing something that's actually about us. It's personal. It's not necessarily a widget, but it's me, my skills, my talent, my reputation.
So Graham, we've been running this series of episodes at the moment. We've been talking about doing business with the affluent.
Yeah.
Now, here I am running my own business, possibly stepped away from something. So we're hearing a stat here that says I'm 82% likely to suffer from imposter syndrome. And now here I am possibly trying to target the top 5% wealthiest people. Wow. Is that percent imposter syndrome?
Well, what it will definitely mean is if somebody's running imposter syndrome in that bridge of coping strategy that's been working, it's likely to widen the gap. So they're likely to then previously where they've been able to just push imposter syndrome into a box, it's more likely to be like a jack in the box in their face every day. Claire, who are you to be working with this kind of person?
Interesting. I know I was just taking a glass of water, but it looks like water to you, but I'm coping, so that's actually vodka. But
actually, that is one of the coping strategies. Yeah.
I prefer gin myself, Graham.
Oh yeah, I don't think I could. No, seriously though, it is there light at the end of the tunnel? Then I mean, these therapies. I mean, without showing you can tell me what your rates are, but because there's a decent chance that we might be clients. But I mean, what are people setting themselves up for a course of treatments?
Well, I actually do I don't do much one-to-one work anymore. Most of my time is actually training other people to do what I do so that I can make myself redundant. Because at some point, somebody else is going to need to take over this work. So I train people both at what I call the first aider level. So that's in corporations. They're the in-house coaches that can do the essentials on this.
Mm-hmm.
Then I train them at the master coach level, because probably about 1 in 10 people, particularly if they're making that step from managing to leading, might need that deeper work. And that's where the master coaches come in with all the bells and whistles. But I also have a self-study program. So people can take that. It lasts 6 weeks. It's designed to be taken 2 or 3 times, so it works more deeply each time. And we've got an imposter syndrome research-backed scorecard that people can take. And what it's shown is that program at just £500 can take you from 80% to 20% in 3 months.
Wow.
So that's not bad. Yeah. No. Or you can work with a master coach, and obviously then you're paying coaching fees, but you're getting that additional training rather than just the coaching sessions. So if you're in that leadership role and everybody in that position is time poor, it's how to make that change really fast, effectively, efficiently. So in the space freaked out with imposter syndrome, just simply not even noticing it because it's gone.
And just thinking about the coaches, how expensive Kevin can get. If you're talking about coaching, you're looking at if it's 500 quid for the sort of self-study, you're probably putting a note behind it to get coaching.
Well, so the self-study is what I would call about the first 2 modules of the main coaching program. So there's another 6 modules that come after that, but you can actually work with a coach for 5,000. And that includes the training, that includes the full support, and it includes that level of change. If you were doing it one-to-one without the online elements, then it's nearer 30. So, so if you're thinking about taking that step up, that's actually a reasonable investment to make in coaching. If you know that it's going to clear that out and then allow you to show up as more of who you really are, and you thrive in that new role instead of coping.
That's a fair bet, isn't it? It's one of those things that you really have to get clear on. And presumably your book, which is called Ditching Imposter Syndrome. Do you go into this sort of almost like, it's not like the sell for it, but basically, this is the reason that you'd probably want to, to get some investment, to make some investment in solving your imposter syndrome. Is it something that you go into?
So what I do in the book is the absolute worst thing possible for growing a coaching business is I actually teach people how to do it for themselves.
Oh, I see. Fine. Okay.
So the book is there for somebody who's self-started. I teach them what I call the pajama ready version of the work I do. So somebody's tired, it's late at night, I'm not there to talk them through it. It's all of the topics and things that I teach in a way that's safe for you to self-study. So you can get a huge amount of the impact but not everybody learns that way best. And that's why I also have the supported programs, because some people need to watch videos and do exercises. Even the imposter syndrome boot camp at just that 500 investment, that comes with 3 months of small group coaching calls with me or one of my mentors. So you're not just left there on your own.
Right.
And then with the deeper coaching, what I find is with people at a leadership level, they want the one-to-one, they want the bespoke. And so my master coaches can guide them through the deeper program. But in those mentoring sessions, they can really go in and go, that's the thing we need to deal with today. So you're not wasting time on fluff and sausage machines.
Yeah.
You just get in there, do the work that you need to do in that moment to allow you to step up and lead at that next level.
But isn't it psychoanalysis in the sense that you're looking back at somebody's behaviors that they took some time ago?
No, because I'm allergic to psychoanalysis. I think it keeps people stuck. Yeah, I can totally see when somebody's been through trauma.
But don't you have to find the root causes?
Oh, no, this is the beauty of it. You don't need to know what triggered it. What you're looking at is the emotion, and you use the emotion to find out what the hidden need is. You don't actually need to know that it was something a teacher said when you were 13. You look at what is the need that's being met by this behavior. Okay, let's clear that need in a happy and healthy way. And then when you don't have the need, you don't need the behavior. So I am not a rearview mirror girl. I do not want to say, if a client needs to talk about the past, I'm really happy to listen, but we have a time limit around it. So they can do that kind of like blah, so they feel heard. But what I'm much more interested in is, how is that presenting for you right now? Let's look at what's driving this behavior, the coping strategy. Let's clear that out, resolve it. Doesn't matter who gave it to you or what situation happened, because when you clear it from the body, the mind, and if I'm going to get woo about it, the energy field right here, right now, then you no longer need to carry that baggage into your future. So you don't need to analyze the past. It's all about, who do you need to allow yourself to become right now? What right now is getting in your way? What's driving that? Clear that out. And then you can become that bit more you, and you start closing the imposter syndrome gap.
Is it likely to feature in marriages?
It can happen in so many contexts. Yeah, you get people, you hear that phrase about, oh yeah, I batted upwards on that one. Yeah, so you can have somebody who actually feels they're judging themselves, comparing themselves to a life partner.
Yeah.
It's more common in the workplace because we're there more, and we're looking at what we're achieving, and we're comparing ourselves to others more. But it can happen, and it's context dependent. So somebody might be running it at work, for example, but only when a certain person is in the meeting, and the rest of the time they're fine, which can be really confusing. But as soon as they hear that person is going to be in the meeting, the heart starts going, the skin gets clammy, the breathing goes up a chest, and the imposter syndrome fires off. So the fact it's context dependent, very few people run it when they do the supermarket shop, for example.
No.
It means it's not who we are. It's like a program that we're running, and you can rewrite that program when you've got the right tools and support.
So forgive me for being slow burn on all of this, but your palpitations are coming across because Kevin's in the meeting, and what such a person he is. He's going to kind of belittle you and all that kind of stuff. Not that he would do it any time, but basically, but that's where your palpitations start, because you're envisaging a future pain. So what is it specifically that you do, particularly to that person, to wash that away?
So what's happening there is it's the mind story fear, the mind story drama. So I talk about two types of fear: legitimate fear, which is jumping out of an aeroplane with a glorified tablecloth on your back, which I used to do at university. Yeah, that's your brain is sitting there saying, Claire, this is a really stupid idea. That's legitimate fear. Mind story fear is the, what if so-and-so does that? What if he puts his face on? Yeah, that face that person pulls whenever I speak up with an idea. What if I get criticized? It's the mind story drama, the what-ifing, the catastrophizing. And this is why anybody that I work with, or my master coaches or first aiders work with, we start with learning how to press pause on those thoughts. Because if that story is going on in your head, you're not going to feel safe to make the deeper change. So the first stage of working together is always about learning how to choose which thoughts to feed, being able to use strategy to literally rewire the thought pathways in the brain, so that you're doing less of the what-ifing and catastrophizing. The drama levels go down, and then you feel safe enough to be able to do that deeper exploratory work. Does that make sense?
I think, it's starting to for me. Kevin got it about half an hour ago, but I mean,
going to give you the look, whatever. Isn't there something as well, Claire, that unless you press pause on it somehow, that you're going to be going out of your way to look for the evidence of them doing exactly that thing you're afraid of.
Exactly. There's this thing in the brain called the reticular activating systems. That's for any listeners that like the jargon. It's the filters in your brain. I call it like the red car filter. You buy a red car, suddenly every car on the road is red. You've got a meeting with so-and-so and you're waiting for the look or the sigh. The filter in your brain is going to look for that and it's going to give it your attention. So one of the things we also do is we teach people how to reprogram those filters.
Yeah.
So that they're not constantly looking for that person's flinch, their poker tell. But also the more comfortable you become as who you are, the less that stuff bothers you. And suddenly you'll have a day where you're sitting through a meeting with that person in the room and they do the eye roll and you laugh and it's genuine because it doesn't faze you anymore. And that's really the essence of what I teach under this natural resilience method is how not to be knocked for six, but without that gritted teeth. I won't be knocked. It's just, it doesn't faze you anymore. Yeah.
You are a gift to humanity. Claire, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you so much, Graham and Kevin.
Wow, Graham. 82% of people in our situation, ex-corporate, formed their own business, trying to do something completely different in our age group, are going to suffer from imposter syndrome. That's a big stat.
Yeah, and it's something that Claire has practical ways to overcome. So the beauty about Claire is I love the fact that she's an engineer. And the fact is that she's thought these things through. Very, very compelling episode, this. It's something that if you can recognize those things in yourself, then you've got somewhere to turn to help yourself. And we would strongly recommend the work that Clare Josa does in this imposter syndrome area. Kevin, it's been an absolutely brilliant episode. Today, I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.